Australia is already infamous for snakes that can kill in minutes, spiders in your shoes, and jellyfish so venomous the pain alone can stop your heart. But what if you discovered this land of modern nightmares is actually paradise compared to its past? Prehistoric Australia didn't just have dangerous animals, it was a living horror movie, crawling with giant venomous lizards, thunderous birds taller than a man, bone-crushing marsupial lions, and predators stranger than anything alive today. Driven by millions of years of isolation, evolution ran wild, creating monsters you'll never believe once walked where cities now stand. How did ordinary wildlife turn into pure nightmare fuel? And just how deadly did it get? Just like how everything is bigger in Texas, everything is deadlier in Australia, at least when it comes to nature. This is the only country where you can wake up to a redback spider in your shoe, a brown snake in your backyard, and a saltwater crocodile waiting in the river, all before breakfast. Australia is home to more venomous snakes than any other continent on Earth, with about 100 of its 170 land snakes carrying venom, and a dozen of those can kill a human outright. The inland taipan, for example, can deliver enough neurotoxin in a single bite to end 100 lives, making it the most venomous snake ever recorded. Not to be outdone, the eastern brown snake is responsible for more deaths than any other snake in the country, thanks to its aggressive temperament and lightning-fast strike. But it doesn't stop at snakes. The box jellyfish, floating like a translucent ghost in northern waters, can kill a grown adult in as little as 2 to 5 minutes after a bad sting. No exaggeration. Its venom attacks the heart, nervous system, and skin all at once. And there have been documented cases where swimmers went into cardiac arrest before even making it to shore. Meanwhile, the irukandji jellyfish, smaller than a fingernail and nearly invisible in the water, packs a venom so potent that it can send victims into waves of pain and muscle spasms that last for days. If you're more worried about land than sea, crocodiles are happy to remind you that Australia is still their turf. Saltwater crocs, the largest living reptiles, have been responsible for 30 fatal attacks since the 1970s. And many more non-fatal encounters that left survivors with scars for life. These giants can reach 6 meters, or almost 20 feet, and weigh over a ton, launching themselves from the water with enough force to snatch a cow or an unlucky fisherman right off the bank. Even the spiders get in on the action. The Sydney funnel web is infamous for venom that can kill an adult in under an hour, although anti-venom has kept deaths at bay since the 1980s. Redback spiders, close relatives of the black widow, send hundreds of people to hospital every year, and their bite causes everything from severe pain to full-body paralysis. And just in case you thought modern medicine made things safe, Australia still records an average of 1 or 2 deaths per year from snake bite, 1 or 2 from croc attacks, and the occasional box jellyfish fatality. Thousands more end up hospitalized. So it may be hard to stomach the fact that Australia is actually much more tame than it used to be. Today's wildlife is the diluted version, because in the deep past, this land was crawling with creatures that make even the deadliest modern killers look like house pets. 45 million years ago, the land mass that would become Australia began to drift away from Antarctica, setting off an evolutionary experiment with no outside interference. As the continent broke free, its plants and animals were left to fend for themselves, cut off from the waves of placental mammals and predators that shaped the rest of the world. In this biological isolation chamber, the rules of size and survival got completely rewritten. With no lions, wolves, or big cats to keep them in check, marsupials and reptiles stepped into every open niche, sometimes growing to monstrous proportions just because they could. Scientists call this island gigantism, and nowhere did it play out quite like Australia. Marsupials, those pouch-bearing mammals, became the main event. Without competition from placental carnivores, they took on roles that their relatives elsewhere never dreamed of. Kangaroos didn't just hop across the plains, some grew tall enough to look a grown human in the eye. Wombat cousins the size of small cars lumbered through the forests. Even the predators were marsupials, evolving into ambush hunters with jaws strong enough to snap bone. Meanwhile, reptiles like monitor lizards and crocodilians had the space and time to reach sizes that would make a Komodo dragon or a saltwater croc seem like a hatchling. This evolutionary free-for-all meant that Australia's ancient ecosystem was packed with animals that looked like they'd crawled straight out of a fever dream. The absence of placental predators didn't just let local species get big, it let them get weird. Herbivores bulked up for protection, while predators grew stronger and more specialized to keep up. When giant kangaroos started browsing higher branches, the marsupial lions got more powerful jaws. When the forests filled with behemoths, the lizards and land crocs bulked up to match. The result was a continent where every empty niche was filled by a homegrown monster, each one stranger and more intimidating than the last. So, while today's Australia is famous for its deadly snakes and spiders, that's only the faintest echo of what came before. Isolation turned the continent into a laboratory for nightmares, where the only rule was adapt or get eaten by something bigger, meaner, or simply more bizarre. And just when you think the land couldn't get any wilder, the first true prehistoric beasts step out of the shadows, ready to show why Australia's reputation for terror is more than just a modern myth. Shockingly, or maybe by this point, unshockingly, the land itself belonged to the lizards and crocs, and the two most terrifying were Megalania and Quincana. Picture a goanna the size of a minivan. Megalania, or Varanus priscus, if you want to impress your friends, was the largest terrestrial lizard ever discovered. Most estimates put it at around 6 meters long, about 20 feet, and weighing up to 575 kilograms, or 1,270 pounds, which means this thing outclassed today's Komodo dragon by several orders of magnitude. Imagine hiking through ancient scrub and seeing a shadow stretch across the clearing, only to realize it's not a tree. It's this reptilian tank, armed with a mouthful of razor-edged teeth. Naturally, being Australian, Megalania probably wasn't content with just brute force. Fossil evidence hints at a venom groove along its jaw, just like its modern relatives. Today's monitor lizards, including the Komodo dragon, deliver a toxic cocktail that stops blood from clotting and sends prey into shock. If Megalania had the same trick up its sleeve, a single bite would have been a death sentence, even for animals the size of a cow. Some paleontologists, like Dr. Stephen Rowe, still debate the maximum size, but the consensus is clear. No Ice Age mammal wanted to meet this lizard in a dark forest. But Megalania wasn't the only nightmare stalking the bush. Enter Quincana, the land croc. Forget everything you know about modern crocodiles. Quincana was a true land predator, built for speed and pursuit, not for lurking in swamps. Adults reach 3 meters, or 10 feet, and tip the scales at 200 kilograms, or 440 pounds. Some jaw fragments suggest rare individuals may have hit 6 meters, but most stuck to the size of a big American alligator. What set Quincana apart were its long, pillar-like legs and hoof-like toes, letting it run with its body clear off the ground, more like a Komodo dragon on stilts than any croc you've ever seen. Its skull was deep and angular, packed with blade-like, ziphidont teeth made for slicing, not gripping. Getting attacked by this croc meant being chased down and carved up like a steak. Between Megalania's venomous bite and Quincana's pursuit, Australia's ancient reptile roster offered a flavor of terror for every taste. And this was just the opening act, because the land of nightmare fuel was only getting started. Meanwhile, if you thought giant lizards and land crocs were the end of Australia's reptilian horrors, think again. Because the ground was also home to a snake straight out of legend. Wonambi, named after the rainbow serpent from Aboriginal dreaming, was a true monster of the wetlands. This ancient constrictor could reach 7 meters, or 23 feet, from nose to tail. That's longer than a city bus, and it didn't need venom to take you out. Wonambi hunted by lurking in billabongs and riverbanks, waiting for giant kangaroos or unwary marsupials to come for a drink. With the strength to coil around a full-grown human, or a much larger animal, and squeeze until the bones cracked, it was the last thing you'd want to meet on a midnight walk. The legend of the rainbow serpent still ripples through indigenous stories today, and some researchers believe it's no coincidence. The fossil range of Wonambi lines up with the earliest human settlements in southern Australia, and rock art from places like the Narrakurra Caves hints at first-hand encounters with these enormous snakes. Whether the dreaming stories are literal memories or mythic echoes, the idea of a serpent big enough to swallow a kangaroo whole is not just fantasy. It's paleontological reality. But even Wonambi had to watch its back, because the seas around ancient Australia were ruled by something even more terrifying. Megalodon, the largest shark ever to prowl the oceans, cruised the coastal waters for millions of years. This prehistoric behemoth dwarfed any modern great white, reaching lengths of 15 meters, or nearly 50 feet. Its jaws could open wide enough to swallow a person whole, and its teeth were the size of a human hand, serrated, sharp, and designed for shearing through whalebone. Fossils of megalodon teeth have been unearthed from Western Australia all the way to Victoria, proof that nowhere on land or sea was truly safe. So, while the forests and rivers crawled with giant snakes and land crocs, the beaches and surf breaks hid drobe, jaws big enough to snap a car in half. Australia's nightmare fuel didn't stop at the shoreline, it just got deeper, darker, and even more dangerous. And with the reptile roster complete, it was finally time for the mammals to take their turn as the continent's most bizarre and deadly monsters. If you thought the reptiles were bad, the mammals weren't exactly cuddly either. Meet Thylacoleo carnifex, the marsupial lion. Picture something built like a stocky leopard, but with the jaw and teeth of a bone-shearing machine. This predator didn't just look fierce on the outside. Inside, it packed the strongest bite of any mammal, living or extinct, for its size. Biomechanical studies using digital muscle reconstructions and fossil skulls show that Thylacoleo could deliver more than 1,000 newtons of force, enough to snap bone like a twig, and easily outclassing modern big cats. But jaws were just the beginning. Its forelimbs were short, thick, and absurdly powerful, ending in a semi-opposable thumb tipped with a retractable claw. Think of a meat hook crossed with a bear trap. That thumb wasn't for climbing trees. It was for grabbing and pinning prey, holding struggling animals in place while those scissor-like teeth did the rest. The rest of the hand was built for grip strength, with deep grooves in the bones to protect the claws when retracted, an adaptation rare among marsupials and a nightmare for anything on the receiving end. Thylacoleo's tail was no slack appendage either. Fossil vertebrae and muscle scars show it acted as a third leg, letting the animal brace upright in a tripod stance. With its hind limbs and tail planted, it could free both arms for a sudden, explosive ambush, launching itself from cover, latching onto a giant kangaroo, and ending the fight in seconds. Dr. Roderick Wells, who helped reconstruct the best skeletons, calls it a marsupial designed for maximum killing efficiency. All this in a package weighing up to 130 kilograms, or 285 pounds, and standing nearly as tall as a modern lion at the shoulder. In prehistoric Australia, the top mammalian killer didn't roar or pounce. It gripped, sliced, and crushed its way through the megafauna, leaving little doubt who ruled the mammal block. Herbivores in ancient Australia didn't just graze peacefully in the background. They were nightmare fuel in their own right. Take Procoptodon goliah, the short-faced kangaroo. This wasn't some oversized wallaby bouncing through the bush. Standing a full 3 meters tall, about 10 feet, it could look you straight in the eye, if not over your head, and weighed in at 230 kilograms, or more than 500 pounds. Unlike today's kangaroos, Procoptodon didn't hop. It walked with a swagger, using its massive legs and broad clawed hands to yank down tree branches. And if something got too close, those legs could deliver a kick with enough force to shatter bone. Think of a heavyweight boxer with the reach of a giraffe. But the kangaroo was just the warm-up act. Enter Diprotodon, the largest marsupial ever to stomp across the continent. Imagine a wombat stretched to the size of a small car, 3 meters long, 2 meters tall at the shoulder, and tipping the scales at 2.8 tons or more than 6,000 pounds. Herds of these giants would have thundered across the grasslands, leaving craters in their wake. Early European settlers who dug up Diprotodon bones thought they'd found the remains of monsters, and honestly, they weren't far off. Meanwhile, the skies and plains belonged to Dromornis, the so-called thunderbird. At 3 meters tall and weighing up to 500 kilograms, this flightless giant had a beak that could crush branches, or, depending on who you ask, maybe even bone. Some experts argue it was a plant eater, others say omnivore, but nobody would volunteer to find out firsthand. And rounding out the lineup, Zaglossus hacketi, the giant echidna, measured 1 meter long and weighed 30 kilos, with legs built for digging and a tongue that could slurp up ants from 1 meter away. Even the spiny ant eaters were supersized. In a world like this, being a plant eater didn't mean you were safe. It just meant you needed armor, muscle, or a killer kick to survive. Aboriginal rock art in Australia holds clues that the Age of Giants didn't just fade into legend. It left marks on stone and memory. In the sandstone galleries of Arnhem Land, ancient artists painted creatures that don't match anything alive today. Some figures show birds with hulking bodies and thick branch-like legs, strikingly close to the thunderbirds paleontologists call Dromornis. Others hint at massive, short-faced kangaroos, drawn with proportions that match Procoptodon more than any modern roo. These images aren't just wild imagination. In the Kimberley, a 2-meter-long kangaroo painting was dated using mud wasp nests trapped in the pigment, landing between 17,500 and 17,100 years old, right in the extinction window for the megafauna. At Cuddy Springs in New South Wales, stone tools and bones from Diprotodon and giant kangaroos have turned up in the same sediment layers, dated to roughly 30,000 to 40,000 years ago. Some of those bones show cut marks, as if shaped by human hands. Debate still rages over whether the layers mixed over time, but the overlap is hard to ignore. For indigenous custodians, these artworks are more than evidence. They're living records woven into stories and dreaming tracks that reach back to when giants walked alongside people. In these marks and memories, the monsters of prehistoric Australia never truly vanished. No one can agree on what finally wiped these monsters out, and the mystery is half the nightmare. Some scientists blame the arrival of humans, arguing that even a small group of determined hunters could have pushed slow-breeding giants like Diprotodon and Procoptodon over the edge. The so-called overkill hypothesis points to cut marks on bones and stone tools found in the same layers as megafauna fossils at places like Cuddy Springs, with some dates landing between 40,000 and 30,000 years ago. But the evidence is tangled. Layers could have been mixed, and not every site tells the same story. Others point the finger at climate, noting that Australia's environment took a sharp turn toward aridity right as the giants vanished. Radiocarbon and luminescence dating of fossil beds show a drying continent, shrinking grasslands, and food supplies running out fast. Some species even held on in pockets for thousands of years after the first humans arrived, hinting that extinction wasn't a single event, but a slow patchwork process. Today, most researchers land somewhere in the middle, a mosaic of causes, with hunting, fire, and climate all playing a part. The only thing everyone agrees on, something tipped the balance, and the age of giants ended almost overnight by geological standards. The question of what really happened still haunts every fossil dig and every ancient painting on stone. Australia is home to more than 20 of the world's 25 deadliest snakes, and that modern danger is rooted in a deep evolutionary story. For over 45 million years, the continent's isolation produced giant reptiles like megalania, land-running crocodiles, and marsupial predators such as Thylacoleo, each confirmed by fossil evidence and anatomical studies. Aboriginal rock art and archaeological finds, dated to 30,000 to 40,000 years ago, provide some of the world's clearest links between humans and these extinct giants. Yet, debate continues. Scientists have not reached agreement on whether climate change, human activity, or both drove the mass extinctions of these megafauna. Today, Australia's unique and hazardous wildlife is a direct legacy of this ancient, perilous world. The fossil record and living species together show that, in Australia, survival has always meant facing creatures unlike anywhere else on Earth.